How much longer do you think he has? My name is Trevor, and that chilling whisper, overheard through a barely ajar bedroom door, was the first tremor of the earthquake that would shatter my life. It was my wife, Sophia. On the phone, her voice hushed and cold. She wasn't asking about a pet or a sick friend. She was asking about my father. My father, who lay dying of cancer in the next room. She wasn't grieving. She was calculating. She was waiting for him to take his last breath so she could file for divorce and claim half of my multi-million-dollar inheritance. She thought I was too broken by grief to notice her scheme. She thought she was the smartest person in the room, orchestrating her greedy grab from the shadows. She had no idea that my father, in his final days, was clearer, sharper, and more cunning than she could ever comprehend. And together, we had laid a trap in his final will and testament, so perfectly designed that her greed, in the end, would ensure her total, spectacular ruin. Our marriage, like a polished facade, always looked perfect from the outside. Sophia was stunning, effortlessly charming, and a social butterfly. Her laughter would fill a room. Her presence commanded attention. She was everything I thought I wanted, a stark contrast to my own more reserved, analytical nature as a successful architect. For 15 years, I believed we had built a life together, marked by milestones, shared vacations, and the slow accumulation of wealth. We had no children, a choice we'd made early on, which in hindsight, simplified her exit strategy. My focus was always on providing, on creating a stable, luxurious life for her. I designed and oversaw complex, multi-million-dollar projects, working late nights, traveling frequently, always believing her happiness was inextricably linked to mine. In truth, I was building a gilded cage, and I was the one trapped inside. The first real crack in my perception came with my father's diagnosis. Richard Vance, my father, was a self-made man. He'd built a manufacturing empire from the ground up, a titan of industry whose name commanded respect. But more importantly, to me, he was a man of profound integrity, quiet wisdom, and an almost uncanny ability to read people. When the doctors delivered the devastating news, aggressive lung cancer, terminal, with a prognosis of 6 to 9 months, my world crumbled. He was my rock, my mentor, the man whose approval I always sought. As he faced his mortality, he did so with dignity, but also with a keen, unwavering focus on protecting his legacy, and more importantly, his son. I immediately scaled back my workload, delegating projects, and moved into my parents' sprawling estate to help my mother care for him. It was a time of immense pain, but also profound connection with my father. I watched him weaken day by day, his once robust frame growing frail. My mother, bless her heart, was a pillar of quiet strength, tending to his every need. Sophia, however, became strangely distant. Her rare visits were brief, almost obligatory. She'd offer perfunctory condolences, but seemed more irritated by my frequent trips between my home, which was now effectively empty, and my parents' estate than genuinely concerned for my dying father. "Can't your mother handle it?" she'd ask, sighing impatiently over the phone. "You're always over there. Our social calendar is suffering." I dismissed it as her discomfort with illness, or perhaps a clumsy attempt at showing interest. I was too consumed by my own grief to see the sinister truth. But then, the whispers started. Little snippets of phone calls. I'd be fetching water for my father, or quietly reading in the next room. And I'd hear her. "No, not yet," she'd whisper, her voice tight, with thinly veiled impatience. "He's fading, though. The doctors aren't giving him much longer." Or, the one that truly chilled me to the bone, spoken with a calculating, almost predatory edge. "How much longer do you think he has?" This is getting ridiculous. It was always about the timing, never about the man, the father who was slipping away. The realization hit me like a physical blow. She wasn't mourning. She wasn't even pretending to care. She was waiting for her payday. She was a vulture, circling. One evening, as my father lay weak in his study, the faint scent of antiseptic clinging to the air, he called me in. He gestured for me to sit beside his large mahogany desk, a place where he had made countless business decisions. "Trevor," he said, his voice raspy but surprisingly clear. "Sit down. We need to talk, man to man, before it's too late." He looked at me, his eyes, though dimmed by illness, filled with a sad understanding, a wisdom that only great experience and impending mortality can bring. "Your wife, Sophia. She's a viper, son. I've been watching her, truly watching her, since I got this diagnosis. And she's not here for me, and she's not truly here for you. She's here for the money. My money." I tried to deny it, to defend her, the words weak and unconvincing even to my own ears. "Father, no." Sophia wouldn't, but the denial died on my lips. The overheard whispers, the impatient questions, the coldness masked as social anxiety, it all flashed before my eyes, illuminated by the stark truth of my father's words. He had seen through her facade long before I ever could, longer than I dared admit to myself. "She's waiting for me to pass," he continued, his voice steady, despite his failing body. "So she can divorce you and claim half your inheritance. She thinks she's clever. She thinks she has played the long game, stayed married long enough, and now, with my death, the coffers will open and she'll walk away rich." He paused, taking a slow, painful breath, a ghost of his old, cunning smile playing on his lips. "But she underestimates a dying man, Trevor, and she severely underestimates the love a father has for his son." He then explained his plan. He had already consulted with his longtime lawyer, Mr. Davies, a man as shrewd and discreet as my father himself. He intended to change his will, not to disinherit Sophia entirely, which might raise suspicions or be easily contested. No, his plan was far more elegant, far more devastating. He would create a specific, legally airtight trap, a series of conditions and clauses designed to ensnare her in her own greed, using the very legal system she intended to exploit against her. I was stunned, heartbroken by the undeniable truth of Sophia's betrayal, but also filled with a new resolve. My father was not just leaving me an inheritance, he was orchestrating the ultimate payback. Over the next 2 months, as my father's life slowly ebbed away, Sophia became almost manic. Her visits to the estate increased dramatically. Her questions about his health became more direct, more probing. "Any changes to his will?" she'd ask me, feigning casual concern. "Has he seen Mr. Davies recently?" "Just for general estate planning, of course." I played along, feigning ignorance, telling her I was too devastated to think about such mundane things. I spoke of my father's increasing confusion, his moments of lucidity becoming rarer, subtly reinforcing the narrative that he might not be of sound mind for any last-minute changes. All the while, my father and I, in hushed tones during his moments of strength, finalized the intricate details of his audacious plan with Mr. Davies. The core of it was a single, devastating clause, hidden deep within his intricate will and testament, designed to be triggered by Sophia's expected actions, specifically her filing for divorce after his death. My father reviewed every word, every contingency, ensuring there were no loopholes. He even arranged for an independent medical assessment to confirm his mental capacity at the time of the final will signing, preempting any challenges. My father passed away peacefully in his sleep, holding my hand. His last breath was a gentle sigh. The grief was immense, raw, and all-consuming. But even in my profound sorrow, there was a strange undercurrent of grim determination. Sophia, predictably, burst into performative tears at the funeral, a vision of mournful elegance in designer black, her face a mask of appropriate sadness. She hugged me tightly, whispered saccharine condolences, but I could feel the cold calculation behind her embrace. 2 weeks after the funeral, with my father barely cold in his grave, the axe fell. I came home to find divorce papers, served by a process server, waiting on my desk. "I can't do this anymore, Trevor," her note. A cold and personal email, read. "I need my own life. I need space." There was no regret, no apology, just the cold, calculated execution of her plan. She was making her move. exactly as my father had predicted. The timing was impeccable, almost perfectly aligning with his projected timeline. Her lawyer, Miss Carter, was a notoriously aggressive shark, a reputation she clearly lived up to. She came armed with a comprehensive list of demands, half of our joint assets, and a significant portion of my expected inheritance from my father, which she argued was a marital asset due to its timing and my father's long-term wealth accumulation during our marriage. She was confident, smug, believing she had me cornered, ready to bleed me dry. She had no idea she was walking straight into a legal minefield my father had personally designed. The will reading was scheduled for the following week. It was a tense affair. Myself, my mother, my two sisters, Sarah and Emily, Sophia, and her lawyer, Miss Carter, all gathered in Mr. Davies' opulent wood-paneled office. Sophia, radiating a smug self-satisfaction beneath her veil of false grief, was clearly anticipating her windfall. Mr. Davies, my father's lawyer, a man whose placid demeanor belied a mind like a steel trap, began to read the will, his voice calm and precise. The initial bequests were standard. My mother received the family estate and trusts, securing her future. My sisters received their respective shares, generous and well-deserved. Then came my portion, the bulk of my father's considerable fortune, his business interests, his entire inheritance. Sophia barely concealed a triumphant smirk, thinking of the millions she was about to claim. She glanced at Miss Carter, who gave her a subtle, reassuring nod. And now, Mr. Davies announced, his gaze sweeping over the room, settling briefly, pointedly, on Sophia. We come to the final clause of the will and testament, a clause specifically requested and personally drafted by Mr. Richard Vance himself, and explicitly overriding any previous agreements or assumptions regarding marital property by any party present. A deep, unsettling hush fell over the room. My mother clutched my hand. My sisters stared, utterly aghast, sensing the impending storm. Sophia shifted uncomfortably in her plush leather seat, a flicker of genuine unease finally crossing her face, but quickly replaced by a confident, almost defiant smile. She thought she knew what was coming, perhaps a small insignificant bequest or a passive-aggressive note. She was utterly, devastatingly wrong. Mr. Davies cleared his throat again, then began to read the clause, slowly, deliberately, each word a hammer blow designed to shatter Sophia's carefully constructed world. To my former daughter-in-law, Sophia Vance. Should she, at the time of my passing, be actively pursuing or have already completed a divorce from my son, Trevor Vance, I bequeath a single, symbolic sum of $1 to be paid from the general estate as a final testament to my profound disappointment in her character and her opportunistic nature. A collective audible gasp filled the room. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a cry. My sisters stared, their eyes wide with shock and dawning understanding. Sophia's face went from smug anticipation to utter, blinding shock, then to a ghastly shade of white. Her jaw dropped. $1? She shrieked, her voice cracking, filled with disbelief. What is this? This is impossible. This is a joke. Furthermore, Mr. Davies continued, his voice unwavering, cutting through Sophia's rising hysteria. It is explicitly stated that any assets or wealth inherited by my son, Trevor Vance, directly or indirectly from my estate, shall be considered his separate property, acquired through gift and testamentary disposition, and shall not, under any circumstances, be deemed marital property subject to division in any divorce proceeding with Sophia Vance. This is to ensure that my son's inheritance remains solely his, protected from any claim by a party who has demonstrated a clear intent to opportunistically acquire said assets through the dissolution of marriage, specifically Sophia Vance. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Sophia's ragged, panicked breathing. Her lawyer, Ms. Carter, had gone completely white, her perfectly styled hair seeming to deflate with her posture. Her mouth hung open, all her usual aggressive bluster vanished. The trap was sprung. My father hadn't just symbolically disinherited Sophia. He had legally insulated my entire multi-million-dollar inheritance from her claims, effectively rendering her entire divorce strategy moot. She couldn't claim half of what I inherited because the will explicitly declared it not marital property. Every cent of my father's legacy was now irrevocably mine, untouchable by her greedy hands. Sophia stared at me, her eyes burning with a furious, desperate hatred. "You knew," she shrieked, her voice reaching a hysterical pitch. "You both planned this. This is illegal. This is fraud." He was confused. He was dying. "It is neither illegal nor fraudulent, Ms. Vance," Mr. Davies interjected calmly, his voice ringing with authority. "It is a perfectly valid and legally binding clause, a testamentary instruction designed to protect the testator's assets and beneficiaries from opportunistic claims. Your father was of sound mind and fully aware of his actions, as attested by multiple medical professionals." He then, with a flourish, presented copies of my father's signed medical evaluations, proving he was fully competent at the time of the will change. My father, in his systemic planning, had accounted for every possible objection, every desperate lie. He had sealed every loophole. The blood drained from Sophia's face, leaving it pasty and gaunt. The full, devastating reality of what had just happened crashed down on her like a tidal wave. Her entire scheme, her calculated wait for my father's death, her aggressive divorce filing, it was all for nothing. The millions she had envisioned were now completely out of her reach. Her greed, her impatience, her cold calculation had led her straight into a legal cage of her own making, built by a dying man's love and foresight. Sophia's lawyer, Ms. Carter, quickly tried to salvage the situation, her voice trembling. "We'll contest this," she sputtered, her usual aggressive bite completely gone. "We'll argue undue influence, fraudulent intent, diminished capacity." "You are free to try, Miss Carter," Mr. Davies replied, his voice firm and unwavering. "But as you know, Mr. Vance was of sound mind, and the codicil was drafted and witnessed by multiple independent parties, including his primary physician, several nurses, and myself, all attesting to his mental acuity. You would be embarking on a very expensive and utterly futile legal battle that would only serve to further publicize Ms. Vance's opportunistic actions." He then turned to my lawyer. "Mr. Peterson, I believe this nullifies Ms. Vance's claims regarding Mr. Vance's inherited assets in your divorce proceedings. Wouldn't you agree?" My lawyer just nodded, a grim, satisfied smile on his face, holding all the cards. The meeting ended abruptly. Sophia, a shell of her former self, a picture of absolute defeat, was led out of the office by her utterly deflated lawyer. Her dreams of a lavish new life, funded by my grief and my father's fortune, lay in absolute ruin. She had taken half of our joint marital assets, as was her legal right, which amounted to a comfortable sum, perhaps $1 million or so. But my father had ensured she would never touch a single penny of his true legacy, the multi-million-dollar inheritance she had so desperately coveted. The divorce itself, once a bitter, drawn-out battle, suddenly became much simpler. Without the lure of my inheritance, Sophia had no real leverage, no motivation to drag it out. Her lawyer, facing a humiliating public defeat and a client with vastly diminished financial prospects, advised her to settle quickly. The final settlement was surprisingly swift. She walked away with her marital assets, her pride shattered, her greedy plans utterly thwarted, and a profound, inescapable humiliation. The family home, which she had coveted, remained mine, as I had purchased it years before our marriage, and it was protected by premarital clauses. She thought she was going to be an heiress. Instead, she was just an ex-wife with a tarnished reputation. My mother hugged me tightly after the will reading. "Your father," she whispered, tears in her eyes, "he loved you so much. He saw everything. He knew." I finally allowed myself to truly grieve, not just for his loss, but for the profound wisdom and protective love he had shown me. His last act wasn't just about money. It was about exposing the truth and ensuring justice. The months that followed were a period of intense healing. I distanced myself from the shallow social circles Sophia had cultivated, the people who had flocked around her glamour and my father's wealth. I focused on my work, on rebuilding my life, and on honoring my father's memory. The sting of Sophia's betrayal slowly faded, replaced by a quiet sense of peace and profound gratitude. Sophia, however, didn't fare so well. The community, once captivated by her charm, now knew her for the greedy, opportunistic woman she truly was. The story of my father's cunning became local legend, a cautionary tale whispered at every social gathering. She found herself increasingly ostracized, her social currency plummeting. Her new life turned out to be far less glamorous than she had planned, funded only by her modest divorce settlement and haunted by the ghost of the multi-millions she almost had, but lost to her own insatiable greed. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she tried to reinvent herself, to move to a new city, but the story of the inheritance trap seemed to follow her. Her reputation, carefully crafted over years, was irrevocably stained by her own greed. She had taken half of what was legally mine in the divorce, but she was left with nothing of substance, only the phantom of what might have been. My father's inheritance to Sophia wasn't money or property. It was the truth of her character, revealed for all to see. It was the public humiliation of her predatory scheme. It was the hard reality that she had been outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and utterly defeated by a dying man she thought was too weak to protect his son. His final act was not just an act of love for me. It was the ultimate, legally binding revenge against a greedy, heartless woman who thought she could exploit a family's grief for her own gain. He had ensured that while she might have taken my money, she would never, ever truly win. The inheritance trap was sprung, and Sophia, caught in its merciless jaws, was left with nothing but the bitter taste of her own thwarted greed. That's my story of how my dying father orchestrated the ultimate payback from great beyond. Now I want to hear yours. How were you able to reveal hidden truths or deliver unexpected justice? Share your stories below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more true stories of betrayal and revenge, and hit that notification bell so you never miss any event.